All right, welcome back to the Pioneer CT-50R auto reverse tape deck. When we left off last time, we had just completed getting our motor back up and going. And today the idea is to get the flywheels cleaned up and get this thing ready for a belt to be installed, get it put back together, mounted back into the frame, and commence with our playback test. Before we can do any of that, the same sticky residue that was on the pulley of the motor is also caked onto the points of the flywheel where the belt wraps around. So I'm going to use, this is a method of just kind of gathering as much of that material up as I can, which I basically just cut off the tip of a Q-tip cotton swab to try to gather up all the bigger pieces of it. And then once I've got the bigger pieces of it gathered up, then we can start the cleaning process. And there's a lot to clean off because the belt is a mess. So the best thing you can do is just take off as much as you can, move on to a new cotton swab. So you're going to go through a lot of Q-tips, but that's to be expected. And I've never seen anyone dumb enough to try to put a belt on it without doing this, but I can only imagine what kind of a mess that would be. So it's just a meticulous, take your time kind of deal and get it all cleaned off. The Q-tip should come back clean and you'll know you have it all. And what makes this one super fun is there's two flywheels and the other one's facing the opposite of what this one is facing. So, and you see how I went along the edge of that and picked up more of that material. It's on the edge too. So don't lose sight of that this stuff can get everywhere, and it does. I had it up here on the wires earlier because the wires came into contact with it, and so I had to clean the wires back off. But it's a nasty mess, and if I'm not mistaken, it looks like there's something caught right there in between the two flywheels. No, that's just a hole. But I've seen parts of the belt chunk off and it'll drop somewhere that it's not supposed to be. And then when that happens, you'll think you have it all off and you'll go to put the new belt on and you'll get a piece caked onto the new belt, and then you'll have to start that process of cleaning the new belt up. So it's kind of a thorough thing. You got to be thorough about it to get it all off there. And so that's kind of where we're at. We got a nice clean Q-tip. No matter where we put it, it's coming back clean, so that lets us know we have it all off, or at least on this pulley anyway, because if there's one piece left, it'll wind up inevitably on your finger, which will get all over everything, or on the new belt, and you'll be cleaning that up. So have to be thorough. Alright, and I'll spare you the cleaning of the other one, and we'll come back once we are ready to reinstall the belt. All right, fast forward a few days and we're back in the garage working on the Pioneer CT-50R tape deck. And when we last left off with this, we were playing around with getting these guys cleaned up, getting all that sticky belt residue, gooey belt stuff off of them, and I did get it all off. I went ahead and pulled them both out of the chassis just so I could see if I did indeed chunk a piece of the belt off in there. As it turns out, I did not. So I think we are ready to move on to the whole belt thing. Which brings us over to this. This is a PRB cross-reference guide for consumer electronics. If you got a tape deck, camcorder, VCR, whatever that uses a belt, and it's possible that the model may be in here, and you can cross-reference it to one of PRB's belts. And in our particular case, our tape deck is mentioned here, CT-50R, with two belts, an FRW 9.6 and an SCY 7.5. The FRY 9.6 is the capstan belt. So looking through my belt stash, I was able to find something that is very close to that. This one at full extensions of probably about 9.5. So I think this is going to be fine. It's not the exact belt that they call for, but I think it will work just fine for this. This is not a customer unit. It's not one someone is paying for a repair on, so therefore I won't be ordering up the exact belt that goes in it. So let's go ahead and get these back reinstalled. Let's put the belt on it and see if we can get this thing up and going. As soon as I get this phone lined up so you can see what I'm doing, hopefully. All right, so there is a particular order that these go in. The one that's got the gear drive on it that runs the head mechanism up and down, it goes in last. And then we have a couple of retention washers that go on. And prior to or after I cleaned the belt goo off of these, I did oil them a little bit. Well, hopefully. Let's try that again. These are pretty weighty, so it doesn't take much for them to fall out and knock those clips right back off. So let's get those back on there. One thing I'll mention is if this was an actual customer unit that they were paying for a repair, there's a lot more that would be done. One of the things that I would have done is removed that cam gear that runs the head mechanism up and down. I would have taken that off and put new grease on it, take the old grease off and put new grease on it just to ensure that it moves smoothly and has longevity. At this point, it does work just fine. The heads are very, fluid. There doesn't appear to be any sticky, hardened grease there, but for someone that's paying for it, I definitely would have done that. And we remember that our motor was actually mounted in a downward position. The connector was in a downward position, so we put that back on. We'll do it in the upward position. And there's 3 rubber bushings here that the motor goes in the larger holes and then just turns and locks into place. And now let's see if we can get our belt on. And it'll get to a comfortable position where it's seated correctly. And this belt's going to be just a little bit wider than the one that's actually called for. So I'm hoping that this will sit on the pulley correctly, on the motor pulley. And the way that I do it, the way that I put it on the motor pulley is basically I use a push-pull tool, and I'll pull down, get some slack in it, and kind of edge it onto the motor pulley. And then from that point, put the motor plate in position. And then just spin the belt over, make sure it's in its correct position, and it should be. You may have to fiddle with it a little bit to get it where it goes. There we go. Now it's in position. We'll put our screws back in here. One thing we'll do with this is, before we even attempt to put it back into the cassette deck, we'll inject voltage at the capstan motor. We'll also inject voltage at the play solenoid that raises the heads and the real drive motor, in an effort to make sure that the mechanism is actually still working correctly the way it's supposed to. That way, if we run into a problem, we haven't got it all mounted back in and have to take it all back out. So that looks pretty good, so let's flip it over. Okay. All right, so we'll take a pause here, and let me get some batteries and some jumpers, and we'll start jumping in some voltage to it. All right, picking back up. Here's what we got. This is definitely worthy of mentioning, is that real drive idler tire right there. It was glazed over, but there's no cracks in it. So what I did was I knocked that glaze off of it. What I did was take a rat tail file and just kind of lightly lay it on top of that as I put pressure towards the real drive motor, and it knocked off that glaze to where it had enough torque to where it could start moving the reel. Of course, once we kick it into the play mode, the reel will start moving correctly. It's just kind of laying there right now because it's got a 9-volt battery powering it. We got two 9-volt batteries. One's powering the reel motor, and the other one, which I haven't got engaged yet, it's powering that solenoid, which is right there. You can't see it, I guess. It's too dark, but there's a solenoid right there. And what that solenoid does is it will kick the head mechanism. If I tap it on the battery, it'll kick the head mechanism on. And that's what lets us know that we have that thing running correctly. I've also got 13 volts coming from the power supply into the capstan motor, and that is what rotates over the cam gear, but that only happens once you tap in your solenoid. Then it'll kick the heads up. It'll trigger that a little mechanism that'll move over and start the process of the rotation of that cam gear on the capstan. So we got this up and going. Let me put the camera back. Let's see here. What I want to do is I want to put a tape in it. We're not going to use anything great, just in case it were to eat the tape. But in order to get that going in the correct direction, I'm going to have to kick the third solenoid, which is the directional solenoid. And I did it, but couldn't get away with it quick enough. There we go. So as you can see here, what this has let me know is it let me know that that mechanism is running correctly, the heads are engaging correctly, the capstan motor is running correctly, and the real drive motor at least has enough torque to move the tape in play, which is all we really care about. So now the big thing comes, we'll put it back into the cassette deck. We'll get all the wiring harnesses hooked up, and we'll get to the point where we see if we can play a tape in it. But at this point, from what we can tell, it seems to be working fine. So we'll hold that thought for just a moment. All right, coming back from the break, and The mechanism is reinstalled back in the deck. A couple of screws on the bottom holding it in and a couple on the top. No wire management. Again, not a customer unit, just one that we're trying to get working so we can play a tape in it. And I loaded up the alignment tape for the speed because I know the speed is way off, and it is. I'll see if I can do this while I'm talking here. 1070, way too fast. We need about 1005 is usually what I'll set it at. So let's see if we can dial that down. And I'm tweaking in that back cover of the motor, the one that I had to get lined up. That way we can have access to the trimmer pot that's in there. And that governs the speed. 1004. Let's see. There it is. Let's see. Yeah, that's good enough for this. And being auto reverse, what we'll do is we'll take the tape out. We'll flip the tape over because it's only a one-sided tape. And we'll play it in the opposite direction, and we're going to find the speed to be faster than 1005, I bet. And it is. Not significant, but it is, and they always are. I've never seen one that runs 1000 or 3000 on the forward direction, and it's not faster on the reverse direction every time. All right, so now that we've accomplished this milestone, let's do what we came to do. Let's play back a tape and record a tape in it. All right, I somehow managed to delete off the ending portion of the last clip, which had the playback and record test on it, so we're going to be redoing that. I picked out something period correct for the playback. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't.
Yesterday is dead and gone. Will tomorrow shine it on? You'll go as far as you believe. The world waits for you, and I know so long as it's true, you can find your place inside the sun.
Sounds pretty good. Let's flip it over to the reverse side and see what that's like. Back to this first side. Music search. The idler tire is in bad shape, so the fast forward and rewind is actually working pretty good, but it could fail at any given time. That tire is in bad shape. Oh, here we go. Little overproduced 80s music for you. Period correct though. All right, record test. Auto tape select. It found it, CR02 tape, and there is a CD loaded. Let's see if you know this. Let's back it up and see what that sounds like. Not too bad. One of the record level plastic buttons is broken off of this, and so I stuck a dental instrument up inside there to get it equaled up with this one. But overall, the tape deck don't sound too bad. So let me tell you the things you didn't see on the video due to the fact that the video would have been hours long. Is I ran into problems with that idler numerous times. I had to keep grinding on it to get it to the point to where it would have any adherence to the reels and the reel drive motor to get it to move. So that kept happening several times that I didn't shoot in the video. The first time I got the mechanism back inside the cassette deck, the play solenoid, the head engagement solenoid didn't work. And so I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I did a voltage check at the solenoid while I was punching play, and there was 13 volts there. And so I did a continuity check on the solenoid and found the solenoid open. And I'm like, open? Solenoids don't go open? And so I found out that when I was rerouting the wires, I bent one of the terminals, which broke off that hair-thin piece of copper coming off the coil of the solenoid. And so I had to touch that back up and put that back in. And connect that back up. Other than that, what we've done to it is take out the capstan motor, cleaned off all the carbon and the burnt spot, put it back together, and we got ourselves a working parts deck. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video on the Boneyard CT-50R Pioneer Auto Reverse Tape Deck. We'll have some better stuff to work on upcoming in the future, but thanks for watching this one.